All right, everyone. One thing that was happening is like a dozen people DM'd me actually this on Twitter, which was AOC, one of her constituents. I'm going to get into what I think actually happened there. In all honesty, to AOC, I think there might have been some hyperbole going on. Somebody came up at a rally where she was talking about climate change and said, essentially, you're not doing enough. It's we're not stopping fossil fuels fast enough, and also we need to eat the babies because there are too many people. I'm assuming this is just a general allusion to overpopulation that's been taken to its hyperbolic extreme. What I would say is it's difficult to tell whether this person was being genuine in that belief. Again, I'll get into it. Or whether it was a satire. The satire is that, like, the New Green Deal sort of socialist hippie-trippy side of the far, far left would support such a thing, like eating babies or at least, like, sterilization or whatever. Like, some people jumped down my throat in my last video about climate change, where I said, basically, you're being a pussy about it. If you're saying, well, plant a tree. Well, do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. How about a carbon tax or carbon credits or something? That won't work. If you actually think climate change is as bad, is reversible, is totally or mostly man-made, and all of these other things, you have to get hip to the idea that you need mass depopulation. I'm not supporting that. I'm not saying that I think that it's an existential problem, but I'm saying that if it is, that is the only solution. The problem is that the world population would be much, much higher than it could possibly sustain at levels that would be CO2 neutral, or certainly carbon negative. Some of these people are like, well, we need to reduce the CO2 already in the atmosphere because of runaway greenhouse effect. Now, of course, I disagree vastly. I think that 100 years from now we'll be still here and we'll be just fine. That's just my non-alarmist self, perhaps using common sense and reason and looking at the larger scope of the world and saying human industry, I don't think is actually causing catastrophe on that level. The big catastrophe is all the trash we dump everywhere. We've got half-melted plastic particulate goo in the ocean, and we've got toxic waste everywhere, landfills and fucking nuclear spills and all this shit. Yes, we do need to plant trees. We need to clean up our world. I'm very 80s when it comes to my environmentalism. I want to save tree frogs too, but I don't think that saving the tree frogs is a prerequisite to the human race being around 50 years or 100 years from now. But the thing is, eating the babies would seem like a draconian solution, but literally what she's talking about was proposed by an accredited Swedish scientist. She tries to allude to this, and I'm not sure. It's not just babies that you need to eat. You need to eat the dead, fucking reduce the human population, reforest everything, get used to basically a primitivistic lifestyle. That humans have to do that in order to survive. What I would say is, what's the point of the human race surviving if we're not going to have any advancement post-industrial era? If we're going to go back to dying of childhood diseases and having to have 12 kids in order to maintain a stable population, what's the fucking point? Now that we've seized and grasped our hopes and dreams and we can fly and go to the moon and build skyscrapers and things, there's no going back. Not without a nuclear war. That's fucking hippie-trippy bullshit. These people would probably want a Cold War. Oh, nuclear winter, that'll cool things off. You watch, there'll be some people who will seriously propose that. By the way, technically speaking, they may not even be wrong. We've never had a nuclear war before. We've never had a nuclear winter. Could work. Maybe we should set off a couple of mega volcanoes and cover the world in ash that way, That's actually funny when I think about it. Because wasn't it a few years ago they were proposing that they take basically like talcum powder or white adobe or something and cover all city surfaces with it in order to reflect light? To try to reduce the heat island effect and reduce climate change or something, showing that they have a vast misunderstanding of how energy systems and ecology work, but it was a funny proposal at the time. I remember, though, back in the mid-70s, Leonard Nimoy with In Search Of, look up Ice Age by Leonard Nimoy or something. It was In Search Of episode. They were proposing taking soot and covering glaciers with it to melt them in order to increase the absorption of light because they were worried about global cooling. They were worried about a different form of climate change. Here's the thing, though. AOC's response is really, it takes the cake here. because she takes the suggestion. It's not like you can tell that she's uncomfortable. She's not taking seriously the suggestion of eat the babies or something. That's hyperbolic. She actually showed enough restraint here. Actually, it's kind of funny because you have to almost admire the fact that she didn't immediately assume that this was a heckler. Because normally if someone comes up to you and they get self-righteous and start screaming about eating infants, you'd say, well, is this person sane? Probably not. If they are, they're trying to get my goat. They're trying to get me to respond. Maybe I should just ignore them and just pretend that they're just nuts. It's not like anybody else in the crowd would have, had a problem with AOC just saying, okay, get the lunatic out of here because of what she's suggesting. What I would say, though, is this. AOC deflects and starts talking about, well, we do need to take climate change more seriously. I'm surprised she didn't pivot and immediately say, well, I understand the drastic need to tackle climate change, and it's true, people haven't done enough, and we haven't been draconian enough. And by the way, those evil Republicans, they're not doing anything. She should have turned it into a partisan issue. But this gets to the heart of who AOC is. She's an actress. She's not very good at pivoting real time in response to things like this. She's sort of like Elizabeth Warren, deer in the headlights mode, and that's sort of what the AOC you saw here. She did all right. Actually, she did better than I expected, but she should have pivoted differently, I think, in order to truly deflect. So now, everyone on the right, at least, is talking about eating the babies. By the way, I do not believe that AOC eats babies. Also, I wish anyone who uses the term environmentalist or green agenda or anything like that, will you please stop making dehumanizing proposals? Because what happens is that then the more religious people on the right, they start rambling about devil worship and stuff, and they'll look at someone like me, like I am an environmentalist in the literal sense, who's an ex-Satanist or something, and they'll think that we drink blood and stuff like that. So you're trying to reignite the satanic panic to cover your asses. No sane person is suggesting eating the babies. I think you need more family planning, especially in certain other parts of the world that have none. I think you do need to reduce emissions of various things, not CO2, be damned, but toxic waste. Not here, though. Mostly it's in China and India, but it's politically incorrect to point that out. Mostly the problem is in the developing world. It's not in the developed world. The developed world has already hit peak emission of everything and is in decline as far as its use because efficiency is rising due to the work of the free market. Efficiency is going up. Even while the population expands, fossil fuel usage is down. Emissions from various sources, they're down. Certainly the waste and all of these things are being reduced over time because of ingenuity and intelligence and private marketplaces. But in centralized places that are still developing, if I'm leading some small African nation, and I've got the opportunity for factories to come in so I can go from a country that is deindustrialized to the extreme, where all of our income is coming from coffee, or all of our income comes from a tobacco farm, or something like that, and I can get some industry in there, we can make textile, I can make a middle class, we can have roads, and all of these other wonderful things. I can increase my own personal prestige as a very centralized, often authoritarian, autocratic dictator in some cases. Fuck yeah. Bring on the goddamn factories. I don't have to smell the soot, because I don't live near the factories. And also, my people are getting a little bit more money, so it probably increases the stability of my tin horn regime. There's your problem. And then you've got a transference in the developing world. You've got a problem that the undeveloped world, you don't have this problem. People have 10 kids, one of them survives, maybe they break even population-wise. The problem is, when you get a country, and we saw this with the Industrial Revolution in the parts of the world that are now declining as far as population, in some cases, Italy, Germany and stuff, places that are post-industrial. You get a massive boom in population because mortality drops while birth rates remain high. Once the population's concentration gets a little bit higher, opportunities dry up. That changes the behavioral side of things. And then biologically, and I don't have proof of this, but this is what I believe that people, when they're around a lot of other people in proximity, especially in urban areas habitually, they're overloaded with pheromones, their body shuts down it makes them more sterile, it makes them less able to reproduce. Why do you think sperm counts in the West are dropping right now? It's because of constant exposure to sex pheromones. Your caveman biology is telling you the cave is overcrowded, don't have any children. You won't be able to feed them. Because our bodies are totally different than our culture, our technology, our linguistics. We'll be able to overcome this in time. It'll probably require genetic engineering, and hopefully in the benevolent sense, but we'll get through. We don't need to eat the babies, and AOC didn't seem particularly perturbed at the suggestion, which is funny. I don't know. Maybe she eats infants or drinks blood or something. Probably not as part of devil worship, though. In her case, it'd probably be probably be for other odd reasons. That's about all. Peace out.